In this chapter, we'll be talking about media, political parties, and interest groups, and how they link people to policymakers. Here's an overview of what we'll be talking about. First, mass media. Mass media is really the primary linkage or challenge of influence. It funnels information to people, it provides opinion and user-friendly analysis to a large number of people without direct face-to-face contact. When we talk about mass media, we're talking about print, television, radio, the internet, and elite media. According to a survey by the Public Policy Institute of California in 2010, television received the most sites as a source for political news. More people look to television for their news. 37%, that's down from 45% in 1999. The internet, 24%, that's up from 5% in 1999. A huge increase in the number of people who are using the internet as their source for political news. On the other hand, newspapers at 15%, that's half of what it was in 1999, and radio has stayed about the same. Let's talk about newspapers for a second. Large corporations really have dominated the scene. You see corporate ownership of the major papers in the state. The Fresno Bee, for example, is owned by McClatchy, a newspaper corporation. There are many ethnic newspapers in the state, about 800 media outlets that serve minority communities. In Fresno, for instance, there's a Spanish language newspaper. There's also a newspaper that focuses on issues for African Americans. One thing we're finding with newspapers in their role of linking people to policymakers is that only a handful can afford to staff a Sacramento bureau. Also, newspapers, when it comes to local government, find that urban areas are too large to cover the hundreds of communities in a newspaper's area, but smaller areas lack the resources to cover politics on a regular basis. The bright spot for newspapers is technology. All major papers have web versions that can run stories throughout the day. While the long-term future of print editions may be bleak, many papers may be more accessible than ever because of the internet. For television, again, the source of news for many Californians, yet it falls short in many ways. First, it's a visual medium. Politics is not inherently interesting to TV unless it is visually interesting. That's why you see public officials employ stunts, symbols, and celebrities to try to get TV media attention. There's also a media bias, a structural bias with television. As a business, it structures its news to minimize coverage of politics and government. TV focuses less on politics and more on crime, human interest, and other stories that they believe more viewers will tune into. Television, even if they cover politics, the coverage is sparse and brief and lacks analysis. And really, there is only one TV station in California that assigns a full-time reporter these days to cover state government in Sacramento. Even with all of that, TV holds promise because of its size. You can reach a large number of people through 4 media markets, and through campaign ads. It's been found that people are more likely to remember a candidate's commercial than straight news coverage. Radio. California has 15 stations with an all-news format. In the Valley, KVPR every Tuesday in Valley Edition covers government and politics as well as other issues facing the Valley. Talk radio is really hard-hitting and abrasive, but what people find is that listeners tend to tune into talk radio that reinforces their views. They don't tune in to hear the issues to make up their mind. Their minds have already been made up, and they are just listening to talk radio to reinforce those views. Internet and social media. The growth of the internet is really revolutionizing politics in the United States and California. It has overtaken TV as the news source for young adults, upper income residents, independents, and college graduates. How important is the internet? We found that it's attracted well-informed Californians and political activists. Again, it tends to reinforce views rather than convert people, and also it's difficult to determine the influence because of the digital divide, that some Californians, particularly in rural areas, are not yet wired for the internet. Let's talk about political parties. A party is a relatively permanent coalition that exists to win public offices for its candidates, promote policy positions, and serve as a frame of reference for voters. Party identification. You can identify yourself as a Democrat or Republican, strong Democrat, weak Democrat, strong Republican, weak Republican. What's important to know is both Republicans and Democrats have lost a share of voters in California in recent years. On the other hand, independent or no party preference voters, the number of those voters is rising. But even when we talk about independent voters, it's not just one solid group. It really spans the demographic spectrum. You see a number of Latinos who are independent, a number of whites, blacks, and Asians. So you have to treat the independent voters as a variety of demographic voters. Now let's look at the partisan geography of California. You see 5 distinct voting regions, and you can see their affiliations. California has a 2-party system. Those parties are generally weak. In our political system, Prop 14 in 2010 established the top 2 primary system. You can see further information on this slide. We're trying to figure out the impact of Prop 14. It's been used in one election, June 2012, and there are some mixed clues about its long-term impact. It's important to remember in California that Democrats have dominated statewide offices and the legislature. California is a Democratic state. Right now, California has a Democratic governor and 2/3 majorities in the state Senate and state assembly. That's the first time that's happened since the 1930s. Minor or third parties don't really have a lot of influence in California politics. How are parties organized? You see the State Central Committee. That's the highest ranking body, and it includes the state chair, who serves as the party spokesperson and also serves as one of the chief fundraisers for the party. And you also see county central committees. What are interest groups? Interest groups are a body of individuals who share similar goals and organize to influence public policy around those goals. Interest groups have an enormous impact on California politics. On the Secretary of State's website, there are more than 900 pages of individual registered lobbyists, lobbying firms, and lobbyist employers. What kind of groups does California have? We have economic groups that are interested in business regulation, tax policy, labor management issues. Professional groups represent group interests in the policy process, such as the California Teachers Association, California Medical Association. California has public agency groups, the League of California, California Cities. City of Fresno is part of this group. California State Association of Counties. Counties in the Valley are part of that association. We see cross-cutting groups that attract members from other groups due to social, ethnic, or ideological ties, and some miscellaneous groups as well. How are interest groups organized? They generally employ lobbyists or individuals who represent interest groups in the policy process. You have in-house lobbyists. If you are a large enough organization, you have your own lobbying arm in your organization. Most groups use contract lobbyists. They represent multiple clients in the same general subject area. Contract lobbyists represent multiple clients in the same general subject area. What do interest groups do? They let the public know what they do through public relations. They work to elect friends and defeat enemies. They sponsor, support, or oppose initiatives. They lobby, they try to influence appointments, and they also participate in litigation. So our system is really competition for influence. The media competes for consumers. Political parties compete for voter attention. Interest groups compete for policymaker attention. Please use this lecture as well as other information in the course documents folder to prepare for your weekly quiz. Good luck.